And welcome to this Shader Forge tutorial. Here we're going to learn how to make a very simple blur shader. Now this is a little advanced, so if you don't know anything about Shader Forge, if you don't have the basics, you should probably look it up on YouTube. You'll find a lot of tutorials on how to get started with Shader Forge. If you don't understand something, then it's probably because it's part of the basics, and I'm not going to cover that in this tutorial. So what are we going to try to do? Of course, you need to have Shader Forge installed. You need to download it on the asset store. It is a paid asset, but it's really worth it if you plan to make your own shaders and you are not familiar with shader implementation. And actually, you can get started making really cool things if you are not afraid to fool around a little bit, to try things out and to get frustrated sometimes, because, well, Shader Forge still has some bugs here and there. We'll probably actually encounter one of those bugs during this tutorial, but I've already prepared the field to in case this happens. But anyways, it costs about $90. It's 80 euros and something. So I guess that's probably $90 on the asset store. You can wait for it to be on discount. Put it on your wish list. It's really great. But if you don't already own it, then you're probably going to have a hard time following. I assume you already do have Shader Forge and some basic understanding. Let's get right into things. So we want to do a blur shader. What do we want to exactly blur? We want to blur what's behind our object. So let's take this plane here, for instance. What I want to turn this into is some kind of a window that will have a blurry effect, right? So and everything that's behind this will be blurred. So basically it's kind of like a transparent thing, and you could actually get some results by using refraction and everything, but we are going to do it completely custom by using some UV techniques. And well, let's jump right into it. So the idea behind this is that we want to sample whatever is behind this plane, and we want to then blur it. So let's go ahead and create a new material. First, we need to create a new material. We're going to call this SF Tut. I hope I'm not using like it's just for Shader Forge tutorial. I don't know if anyone else uses this. If someone else might be called SF Tut, I don't know of it. If that's the case, I really apologize. It just looks like a good naming convention for this tutorial. SF Tut, and we're going to call it simple blur. Right. That's it. So let's assign this material to our plane here. And what can we do now to sample what's behind it? What's behind our guy here? Well, let's jump into Shader Forge. Let's exit this shader and create a new shader and call it, make it a custom lighting. Right, we'll save that shader into our shader folder, and we're going to call it SF Tut underscore simple blur 001. Why not? So of course you can use your own naming convention. It's just the one I use. So by default, Shader Forge in this version anyways, I've seen older tutorials where it doesn't do this, and actually the main input is switched around. But this is v1.25. The current version is actually v1.26, but I'm using Unity 5.2, and Unity 5.2 works with 1.25. And there are some bugs in Unity 5.3 that are annoying me here. So we don't need any of this. This is a base blend font that is created automatically when you make a custom lit shader. And let's use the first node we're going to use here is screen position. Yeah, if I press here the S key or whatever key, it's going to bring up this little menu that allows me to select from whatever starts with the letter S. It's pretty cool to work here. If you don't want to use it this way, if you want to see how it is, if you can right click, and I think it's in geometry data. Yes, screen position. There we go. So let's have a little look at what screen position does. Well, it maps the screen in UV space. So it maps the whole screen. So the center of the screen is going to be 0, 0. And whatever is behind there is going to stay 0, 0, I think. Or it might go in the minus value. I don't know if this is clamped or not. It's not mentioned in the documentation. So this is either still 0, 0 or it's -1, -1. And as you go up to the top right corner of the screen, it becomes 1, 1. And as you can see, this is, well, let's plug this in. Let's plug this in the custom lighting and have a little look. By the way, let's go in our shader settings first. So we're gonna set the path SF tut/transparent. I guess it's a transparent shader, or we could call it effects or whatever. You know, you just put your own path. This path is the path that's going to be used inside the shader selection of our material. You're going to see it very soon if you don't understand what I mean. So we compile this shader and we get back here. We select our plane, and here, as you can see, SF tut, we got transparent and simple blur 001. If we select this, as you can see here, we are mapping the screen space in UV. So whatever is at the center of the screen will be 0, 0, which means it's black. It's around here, right? And at the top right corner, it's going to be yellow, right? Black, yellow, really cool. There are several settings for this. You can either do normalized or tiled. The difference between tiled and normalized is in normalized, the center, in both these settings, the center will always be 0, 0. But when it's normalized, the top right corner of the screen is always going to be 1, 1, and it's going to be blended from 0 to 1, 1. Whereas tiled, it depends on the aspect ratio. So if your screen is perfect, if your aspect ratio is 1 to 1, so if your screen is perfectly square, which will hardly ever happen, but then the top right will be 1, 1. But anything beyond this will kind of be stretched. And we're going to see this very soon. And once again, I'm not sure if those values go beyond 1. I think it goes beyond 1. So this becomes 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, etc. And this goes beyond -1 if it's not clamped, right, to the top, the bottom. So let's have a look here. Wait, I think we should first compile this. So let's get back to our shader forge, compile. And as you can see here, we don't see a lot of difference because this screen is not very stretched. But here, you really see that things become pretty yellow very fast. And you can actually see this line here. It's kind of a line that from here on, the values are going to be stretched like this, right? This is tiled. This is when it's tiled, right? That's the main difference between tiled and normalized. And then there's a third setting. Let's go back to Shader Forge, which is scene UVs. And instead of sampling the center to be 0, 0, it's going to be the bottom left. It's going to be 0, 0. And this is actually what we need, right? So if I compile this, and as you can see here, the top left, the top right is going to be 1, 1, and then our center is no longer black. But if you go to the bottom left, like here, this is now totally black, right? So this is how you sample screen space. Basically, there's 3 different ways, and this last way is the way we're going to use, because now that we have sampled here the UVs, so this is exactly matching the position of each pixel of our object on the screen space. So if we just then transform those pixels and tell ShaderForge, hey, tell our shader, hey, get me the pixel that's behind this pixel, right? Give me the pixel that's right there. So basically, it's going to be, you know, this little guy here, right? Or little guy. It's going to be this one. This pixel here is going to be what's mapped to this. Sorry, I'm moving my camera around. I hope you're not getting dizzy. I'm moving things around a lot. But okay, this is this guy that we want to sample. And there is a node for this in ShaderForge. And that node is called screen color or scene color. I never know. Scene color, yes. Scene color. So once again, I press letter S. I press key S to get this, or I can go here and go into scene data and get scene color. And we just plug the UVs here, and we plug that into custom lighting. Now, let's cross our fingers because this is where ShaderForge usually gives me a bug. So let's compile our shader and see. Okay, yeah, that's it. We get that bug right here. I don't know why it does that, but as you can see, it doesn't sample things correctly. It doesn't sample anything. It just samples the backdrop here. I don't know why it does that. So, but don't worry, I have a backup. So let's just delete our shader here. Bam, bam. We're gonna delete this guy. We're gonna delete this. Okay, he doesn't like it, but it's okay. Let's go to ShaderForge. Let's create a new custom lit shader. So we're just gonna call it exactly the same way, right? SF tut simple blur. We're just gonna call it 002 to be sure. Okay, we're just do the exact same thing, right? So I don't know, maybe you're using another version of ShaderForge where you don't get that bug, but I have no idea why it does that. I've tried everything and yeah, I don't know why it does this. Anyway, SF tut slash transparent. I don't need direct 3D 11. I want to fall back to my standard shader. We're gonna just do the screen position, scene UVs, and then scene color, like the UVs, like this. You're gonna see the magic is gonna happen pretty quickly. Should be working. SF tut, transparent, blur 002, and there you go. So as you can see, we sampled every single pixel, and our plane here still exists. You see that there's this little shadow here that's projected, but it's just that we sample everything that's behind it. So, and this happens real time, right? So it's not transparency, it's recalculating every single pixel. Excuse me. So now that we have sampled everything that's behind it, we want to blur it. Now, how do we blur? Well, in this case, what we're gonna do is, you know, like when you have been drinking a little bit too much, or when you go to a 3D movie and you don't put your 3D glasses on, you have blurred vision. You have double vision. You know, you see one eye looks in one direction and the other looks in the other, and then you get two images basically that are offset by a little bit. So that's how we are going to get our blurred effect. We are going to offset. We're going to offset this texture, and we're going to sample it multiple times. We're going to offset it a little bit upwards, a little bit downwards, a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. How do you offset things in ShaderForge? Well, we're going to see this right away, right? Let's jump back to our shader here. And first of all, what I want to do, because otherwise this is going to be getting very messy very quickly, I want to use one of my favorite nodes in ShaderForge, which is the set and get nodes. Set and get nodes allow you to save variables for a later use, and they can be anything. They can be either vectors or they can just be values. Well, a value is basically a vector 1. And let's give this guy a name. So this is a variable. I just always start with the double underscore. The reason for this is this way I am 100,000% certain that this variable doesn't already exist in the shader. Because, for instance, if you give this variable the name of attenuation, this is actually going to bug because there already exists an attenuation variable somewhere in Shader Forge, I think, or maybe it's just something that's that you cannot use in a shader. So I do double underscore, so I'm sure that this variable does not exist, and call it screen position, right? And I'm just gonna plug this in there, and whenever I want to reuse this value, I just do a get, right? If you want to know in the contextual menu, it's in utility, get and set, right? And I can just here get screen pause. That's the way I can use it. And if I now plug this in like this, we're gonna get the exact same results as we had previously, right? So what I want to do is I want to offset UVs. So if we're going to use an offset, then we're going to use a little slider here. We're going to call it offset, right? Value of 0 to 1 is a little too much, right? But just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to use a value of 0 to 1, and then we're going to change this a little bit later. Once again, I'm going to use this a lot, so I use a set node here. I call it underscore underscore offset. Plug this in. So if I want to offset my screen position, all I need to do is to add the offset to the screen position. So I do a get here to get my offset, and I use an add node to add the get and the set. And you see, as I increase this, I'm adding value to this, like this. And we're going to see what happens now here in our scene when I do that. So let's compile the shader. And let's get back, let's select our plane. And we have here our offset. And if I offset this, you can see that this moves around. And then we start having this weird thing here. That's because we're adding way too much offset, and we're actually offsetting beyond what has been sampled on the screen. You see this thing here is this thing here. If I stretch this like this, you see that we can sample a little further, but beyond that, he doesn't know what's going on. This is beyond screen space, so that's why we're getting that weird artifact here. We don't want that, of course. So that's why we're going to use offsets that are a little smaller than that. But it's just to illustrate how... Excuse me! Ooh. Excuse me. I had to sneeze so bad I couldn't even warn you before. Sorry for your ears. So this is how you offset things. But we don't want to offset, as you can see here, we're offsetting in both directions, right? We don't want to only offset in both directions. We also want to offset vertically, upwards, downwards, and then horizontally to the left and to the right. How are we going to do this? Well, let's take our screen position here, and we're going to take the we're going to save the screen position U and the screen position V. So once again, we're going to use set because we're going to use those things a lot, right? And we're going to say screen pause U, and another set, and we're going to set screen pause V. So by adding just to the V or just to the U and leaving the other one alone, we can actually add vertically or horizontally. Let's see this in action. Let's take, once again, I'm just gonna select this. Oh, oops. Nope, nope, it's not what we want to do. I'm gonna select this. I'm gonna duplicate it like this. Instead of adding screen pause to the offset, I want to add screen pause U to the offset. All right. So here, as I offset, you can see that it's going like this. Okay. I'm not changing anything. And then I'm going to make a little bit of space here. I'm going to use an append node. Now what append does, it allows you to rebuild a vector, right? So it's an append, basically, if you add a vector 1 to a vector 1, it's going to become a vector 2. If you add a vector 1 to a vector, if you append a vector 1 to a vector 2, it's going to become a vector 3. If you append a vector 2 to a vector 2, it's going to become a vector 4, etc., etc. So we're going to append this to our screen pause v. So we're going to use a get screen pause v, like so. And we need to be careful not to switch things around. So it's first the U that's going to be on the red, and then the V that's going to be on the green. And here, now if I increase my offset, as you can see, I'm appending here like this. Awesome, isn't it? And now, if I plug this into my scene color, what's going to happen? I think it's compiled, but I always double compile, and I'm a compile freak. And now this should just slide in one direction. We're on the vertical axis. Okay? Now let's do the same for the vertical. Let's take a vertical. So let's go to Shader Forge. We're going to select all this, duplicate it, because why not? I'm just going to switch things around here, and we are going to add our screen pause V to our offset, and then we're going to append the screen pause U. And now, as you can see, this is going like this. So we're going to have in our scene color here, if we compile, it's going to move pretty expectedly horizontal, on the vertical axis, like this. Great. So this is how we offset. But how do we kind of now offset in all directions at once and then blend all those things together? Well, we're going to need to actually take those scene colors and add them together. So if I do this now, let's align those guys a little better. I'm going to add a new scene color here. Right. I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to add an add node. And I'm going to add these guys together. And then there's just one more thing I need to do. Let's change our offset actually so that we can't go like beyond 0.01, I guess, 0.05. Let's make a max offset of 0.05, right? So if we add this together, what's going to happen? Well, here our offset is 0, and now we're moving things in both directions. And you can see we get this double value. Now, you can see this is over bright. That's because we're adding those things together. But the problem is that if you add pure white, if you add gray to gray, you're gonna get a brighter white. And we don't want that. We want to have the correct. So we need to average this out. And how do you do this? Well, once again, in Shader Forge, you're going to divide. We're going to divide this by a value of 2 because we've added two things together, so we divided by a value of 2, and now we plug this into custom lighting. We compile the shader, we get back to Unity, and now, as you can see, we don't have overbright values anymore. Our things are right. Now, of course, we're only having double vision here. It's a little blurry if I just have a very small offset, but I can tell that it's two things on top of each other, right? So there's one more thing I need to do. I want now to do this. First, I need to add the base thing here. I need to add my base so that I keep my center thing. Well, I understand what I mean. So let's do this, duplicate this guy here. And we're going to use this later. We're going to get our screen position. So basically this is the non-offset screen position. We're going to add these things together, right? Like this. And then we're just going to divide it by 3. So we keep our reference image. If we go back here, you see that we keep the reference image like so. Okay, pretty nice. And now we are going to do the same, but in the other two directions. So how are we going to do this? Well, all we need to do is to change this a little bit. And instead of having an add node, all we're going to need to have is a subtract node. So we're going to do this. I'm going to delete the add node, add a subtract node, duplicate this little guy, align everything properly, like so. And we're going to add this like this. And actually, let's align things. I like when things are aligned. I know it's kind of a little freaky, but I like it. I like things nice and aligned. Yeah, we put our subtract node here. Come on, subtract node. I want you to be aligned correctly, like this. Subtract. Now, when you duplicate getters and setters, for some reason, it doesn't keep this. So we need to do the same. Screen pause U, screen pause V, offset, screen pause V, screen pause U, offset. And we're going to add to this once again. Do the add, do the add. And here, since we're adding 5 together, we're divided by 5. And now, as you can see, this already starts looking a little bit blurry. And now we're going in all 4 directions. We're getting some strange artifacts here. Something is not quite right. Yeah, something's wrong here. What is it? What is it? Shader Forge. So yup. It's U and V, and this is V and U. Okay, this should be better. File shader. Yeah, that way's looking better. As you can see, we can actually start to make out this little square here, but it's not until we start separating things. And now, as you can see, it really starts looking really blurry, right? Like this. Now it's still, you can still make out the fact that it's a multiple thing, but not if it's just a little bit like this. So if we want to blur things even more, one first thing we can do is also go in the diagonal directions. So if we want to move diagonally, we're gonna have to use here this kind of thing, right? So because here we were moving diagonally upwards to the left, right? So, oh, by the way, forgot to do this, right? So I go in the scene color. I add my scene color here. Right, I align this right. So I keep adding. Okay, I can't add more than 5 things together. So I need to use another add node. We're gonna do this for all 4 directions. So here we're adding to the offset. Then all we need to do here is subtract. So let's do this. Subtract, screen pause and offset, like this. Okay, see how quickly things can become messy. And let's do this and this. And now we also want it, so here we have this vertically, this diagonal from so up left or down, up right or down left. How are we going to do the, we're going to do the other directions as well. Actually, I've never done this before, so I'm just going to have to think this a little bit through. So we want to go to the opposite direction. So instead of adding and subtracting, what we need to do, I want to go there. So, I need to think this through a little bit. We're gonna play around with things. How do you invert the direction here? So let me take my offset here. Right, this is going there and there, okay. And what if I want it to go diagonally? Yeah, okay, I know what I have to do. This is going to be a little more complicated because I have, if I want to go diagonally to the left, upwards, then I need to add to the U where I subtract to the V. So I'm going to do get. Not a set, a get, right? I get screen pause U. I'm going to get screen pause V. I'm going to then go and add. So yeah, that's it. So I take U, V, okay. So I take my offset here Okay, so I'm gonna add to the U and subtract to the V. So I'm gonna add the offset to the U. I'm gonna subtract the offset to the V. Like this. Then I'm going to append these two. And it's the U and the V, okay. And then I'm going to use my scene color. Like this. Plug this in. And add. And now I'm going to do the opposite. So let's just duplicate this. Let's move this up a little bit. So, yeah. And then duplicate. And so I'm just going to switch things around. So instead of adding to the U, I add to the V offset. And I subtract to the U. And I need to switch these guys around if I want to append to the right things. And now I add here. And now, before we divide, we need to add another add node. We add these together. And now our value is going to be 9. So we divide here. Move our add node here. Divide by 9. Yep, 9 should do it. Compile the shader, and now we have a blur in all directions. And as you can see, this is already pretty blurry, right? Pretty cool. But now if you want this to be even better, you need to do multiple samples. So basically what you need to do is you need to do all this all over again. So you take, basically you do this, bam, all of that. You do a big duplicate. And you do the same, but only with an offset that's half the offset that you have, right? So you do half the offset and you offset that. And you can do it multiple times, you can do multiple passes, but there's no way that I know of anyways in Shader Forge to kind of, you know, do a loop or something. If you could do a loop and change a value in the loop, that would be great. But it doesn't have that, so you're gonna have to do it yourself. But you know, looks pretty nice. However, let's say I make this plane a little bit bigger. Let's scale this. So as you see, this camera is annoying. I don't want to see the gizmo. I don't want to see the gizmo. Yeah, let's do it like that. Okay. So as we get closer to our plane, well, this is a little too obvious, but let's do. Okay, let's blur it like that, okay? So it looks pretty good. But as we get further away, as you can see, it's our blur is kind of not as good, right? Things get apart, you know? And that's because as we move away, well, it still moves the thing by the same amount of pixels, but 5 pixels from this distance or 5 pixels from this distance, it's not the same, right? So here, the blur effect is not equivalent from far away and from close. See how this is like a little sharper, and this is way blurrier. So we want things to be kind of smoothed out as we go farther away. And here's how we're going to do this. Basically, we need the offset to become smaller as our view is farther away from our object. So we're going to take, where is it? Distance. We can use a distance here to have the distance between two vectors. And the two vectors we're going to use is object position, like this. So this is the center of our plane, and the view position, which is here. The view position, which is the position vector of the view of our camera, basically. And if we then take that and we divide our offset value by our distance, then we already get something. But yeah, let's see what this does, right? So we divide our offset by the distance between the object's position and the view position. And we feed that into the offset. Now, what are we going to do? What are we going to see? As we move away, as you can see, as we move away, it becomes too sharp. So the blur kind of fades away. And now we can actually pump this value a little bit to see this effect even better. So here, this is very blurry, whereas here, this is not blurry at all, which is not what we want. We want this to be kind of, evened out. So this is because as the further we get away, the less the division has to affect our blur. So there's one last thing we need to do. We go in Shader Forge, and we are going to divide the distance, or we're going to multiply, it's the distance, right? So we want to do a log, a natural log, right? And we want to divide the distance by the log of the distance. If that makes sense to you. And let's organize things a little bit more here, like this. So this way, as the distance increases, the effect of the distance on the offset is going to be reduced. Compile shader. And now, as you can see, we move away and we go closer, and this blur is really looks the same, right? And that's how you do a blur shader in Unity. Now we can now, for instance, take this and you could add an outline or something, but it just already gives pretty good results and in a simple way. So this is it. This is our blur shader, simple blur shader. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something, and hopefully, if you like it, if there's enough views, enough comments, I might try do some other tutorials on ShaderForge. Goodbye for now, and